Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, on this edition it's Sonic 3 and Knuckles, brought to us by Sega. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is a combination of Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, with Sonic 3 being released in February of '94 and Sonic and Knuckles coming out in late '94. They were meant to be one game, but unfortunately due to time and financial restraints they had to be separated into two games. But what was so awesome is Sonic and Knuckles was actually a lock-on cart, where you could put another cartridge on top of it. This allowed you to combine it with Sonic 2 in order to have Knuckles in the original Sonic 2, as well as combining it with Sonic 3 would provide you with a full game of Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles combined into one long adventure, making for one of, if not arguably the best Sonic game of all time. For this run of the game, I'm going to be playing as Sonic and Tails together. I'm going to be going through every one of the levels and collecting all 14 Chaos Emeralds. 7 in the original Sonic and 3, and then the Super Chaos Emeralds that are in Sonic and Knuckles. I won't be overusing the Supersonic ability. Thankfully, it's a lot easier to control in Sonic 3 and thus Sonic and Knuckles than it was in Sonic 2, where it kinda almost always happened as soon as you jumped with 50 rings. Here you had to double tap the ability when jumping in order to actually turn into Supersonic. The minigame, or the Blue Sphere game, is how you're able to get the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic 3 and thus Sonic and Knuckles. Basically, you have a really cool 3D-esque perspective where you have to control Sonic, Tails, or Knuckles, whoever you're playing as, and collect all the blue spheres. In the upper left corner, you have how many spheres you have to collect still, and in the upper right, the amount of rings you've collected. If you're able to get every one of the rings, you get a perfect, which rewards you bonus points. I'll be getting quite a few perfects, but I won't be getting all perfects throughout the course of the run. A big way that you're able to gather the rings, though, is by turning the spheres into the rings. And to do this, you have to make a square around a group of the blue spheres. For example, right here, you can make a big square around, just going around the border. And if you have a big border, you'll be able to thus turn them all into rings. And that's how you're able to get the perfects in most of the Blue Sphere games here. After collecting all the blue spheres, though, you're rewarded with a Chaos Emerald. I will say now that I'm far from perfect with the Blue Sphere minigames. I practiced them a lot in order for this run to finally come together. It's been many weeks of playing through this game in order to finally get this particular playthrough. But at the same time, I'm sure I'm going to make a couple of mistakes as far as the path I take during the levels, especially though the Blue Sphere minigames. I will be completing them all on my first time around. If you end up failing at a Blue Sphere game, you'll go on the next time you get a big ring to the next one in order, but once you got through all 7 of them, you'll then go back to any one that you happen to have failed at. When you make it to this spot here, you have this machine. It ends up working as the mini-boss for this particular level, but we can't kill him quite yet. In fact, he just kind of blows up the entire jungle here and turns into a flaming mess, which is a really cool effect for its time. And then we're going to continue on through the stage, dropping on down here and then doubling back to the left in order to get another one of the big rings. While I may miss a couple of big rings, I will still be getting all of the Chaos Emeralds pretty quickly throughout this run, especially when it gets to the Sonic and Knuckles aspect of it, as you can actually get all of the Super Emeralds within the actual first zone of the game. This one is a little bit trickier than the one we just did, but it gives you ample opportunity to practice those square making skills so that you're able to get plenty of the rings and be able to easily get through this whole thing. When it comes to the strategy for most of the Blue Sphere games, it really does boil down to memorization and very fast reflexes. The longer you remain on a Blue Sphere level, the faster that Sonic ends up moving, thus making it more difficult in order to grab all of the spheres without accidentally running into one of the red ones. Thankfully, there's no time limit on them, so you do have forever to pretty much walk around and eventually get them, but Sonic will keep increasing in speed and it'll make it a lot harder in order to navigate around. Mastering also the distance of Sonic's jump in the Blue Sphere games will come in handy, because there are a couple of times where you can use this to your advantage to get over areas and such. Though early on, like right here, we're able to easily be able to still gather all of the blue spheres without having to go out of our way too much. There, I'm able to get another perfect. We're going to finish up by walking around these couple of bumpers in the middle and grab ourselves the second Chaos Emerald. Popping out of the big ring in the Blue Sphere game, we go up to the top here, right past the marker that we had done in order to kind of work our way back around to that big ring. One thing that's really cool about Sonic 3 that was introduced was the elemental shields, the lightning, fire, and bubble shields, which really end up helping you. In fact, I use these to my advantage quite a lot throughout the course of the run in order to negate some of the enemy attacks. Now we actually face off with this machine, but we're just going to jump on top of him in order to easily deal a lot of damage to him. Once we deliver enough hits, though, we've finished up Act 1, and we're moving on to Act 2 here of Angel Island Zone. As soon as we gain control of Sonic here in Act 2, we're going to do a spin dash and go all the way through and bust through the wall, going to another one of the giant rings and our third Blue Sphere minigame. This always happened to be one of my favorites. It's a pretty straightforward Blue Sphere game. As long as you don't kind of go backwards or anything, it's very easy in order to actually get all of them. It's a bit difficult, though, to get a perfect, and I will show that, though, here. You'll have to basically do a timed jump in order to avoid missing out on the opportunity to get the perfect. But if you're just trying to get the actual Chaos Emerald, it's a pretty easy one. But I always like the overall design of the maze here in this particular Blue Sphere game. You'll see that you have kind of like gateways that basically just lead you right into the next area where you're able to gather those spheres and then go through another couple of blue spheres into the next area. Watch out for the bumpers right here, since they're kind of spread out a little weird. I usually try to go around the edge. That helps me a bit as far as making sure that I don't accidentally bump into any of them. Of course, the farther we make it in, we're having a big increase in the speed here, but we're still able to have pretty good control of Sonic during this. Go through here, and then the next set of 2 blue spheres, and for this last set, we're going to do a big jump over them. And then grab all of these, getting all the rings, thus getting a perfect, and then grab the last one that I ended up missing. I tried to time it that I would jump over both of them, but it's difficult to jump 2 blue spheres with one jump. You have to time it really, really well, but either way it worked out, and I'm able to get the perfect and the third Chaos Emerald. Back into Angel Island Zone, we continue on through, break open the bridge, and we have that bubble shield that we were able to gather from the sign, and we can get another bubble shield right there. One thing I've always loved is in between the Act 1 and Act 2, that sign that comes down at the end of Act 1, you can bounce it around for bonus points and potentially get some items because of it as well, including extra rings for the next zone, or an extra life, or in this case, you can get some of the shields like the bubble one we got here for this time. Jump up here in order to hit the switch in order to drain the water, and then once you have drained that water, continue on through the level pretty easily through most of this stage here. We're going to drop down where this bridge is, and then do a spin dash, and this will help us get through the area, get another one of the bubble shields, and as to be expected, if you have the bubble shield, you will not end up running out of oxygen underwater, so keep that in mind, try to keep a hold of it as much as possible. Drop down into the water here, and go to the right, and you'll be able to get to the next Blue Sphere game.
This one's a little bit trickier in order to get that perfect, but as you can see, there's a nice little strategy of kind of getting into the group of blue spheres and then making the square within. Just be careful not to go too far and run into that other couple of red spheres that we got as we were coming in. It's still relatively straightforward, not a whole lot of divergence that we have to do during all of this. Have to do a couple of nicely timed jumps, and we can grab these blue spheres and watch out for the bumpers. Then we have another big group that we're able to gather quite a lot of rings. There's a decent amount of spheres that you have to collect, though, during this particular blue sphere game. Here's another group that we're able to make into a big square. Grab all of those rings. Now right there, I ended up saving one blue sphere, and the reason why is to make sure that I'm able to get the perfect. If you do this right, you can get this entire giant mess of blue spheres, all to turn into rings. Then you can gather all these rings, which will give us the perfect, and then we can just grab that one last blue sphere that I left alone. I made that jump as I entered into this area, and that way I'm guaranteed to get that perfect. We now have over half the Chaos Emeralds already. We have only 3 more left to gather. Now we're going to start climbing up the waterfall. There's these big blocks that pop out of the waterfall. They will go back in after a few moments, so be careful as you're traversing and jumping up here. If you fall down, you'll have to re-go back through this whole area. When you make it to the top, there is another one of those checkpoint markers there, which I ended up not hitting here, but thankfully I should be able to handle things. And this actually leads us right to the Robotnik boss of Angel Island Zone. For the first segment here, though, you just want to hold right. Keep Sonic running. As long as he's running to the right, he won't be able to get hit by all these missiles that are dropping. Tails, if he's with you, isn't so lucky. He'll usually end up getting hit quite a bunch by the bombs during this segment. After the ship drops all its bombs and goes past, we're then going to run through the forest. You have a really cool effect of Robotnik in the background through the trees. And that leads us to the Robotnik boss. As he appears, he has these cannons that fire out fireballs. They will burn the bridge, so be very careful not to accidentally fall down into the giant pit that he creates. After a few moments, though, he will teleport or disappear into the waterfall and come out the other side here, and that's way we're able to hit him a couple of more times. You may need to dodge a fireball or 2 more. Once he's done, though, hit the giant capsule in order to free the animals, and after a small scene with Knuckles, we'll be moving on to Hydrocity Zone. As we drop into Hydrocity Zone, we have to be careful, of course, because underwater, Sonic can only breathe for a certain amount of time, unless we end up having one of the bubble shields. The other elemental shields, which I always thought was a nice little touch, end up going away. The fire and electricity one ends up dissipating and going away if you end up dropping the water while having those equipped. Well, we are getting a little bit low on oxygen here. Instead, we're just going to head to the right past this turtle if I'm able to survive enough, because there is a bubble shield located right here, so we don't have to really wait for that to end up coming out. One thing I love also with the shields is the fact they deflect so many of the projectiles from a lot of the cannons and stuff. It's just a really cool thing that they just have those bullets bounce off of them so that Sonic's able to take no damage there. Popping out of the water here, we're going to head over to the left a little bit, and we're going to take this upper path, and this will allow us to actually get to another one of the rings. After the bridge breaks, hold left while dropping down, and you'll find another big ring, and thus another one of the Blue Sphere games. Here, we've gotten pretty used to now, like, the movement during the Blue Sphere games. We just have to be careful. This one's a bit more convoluted, though, than the ones we've dealt with before. You have to do a little bit of jumping and maneuvering of Sonic in order to make sure that you're able to find all of the Blue Spheres. So, this is where things really start to crank up in difficulty, at least a bit. For experts, of course, that have played these games 1,000 million times, I'm sure these levels are an absolute breeze. But back in the day, making it to these stages, especially the later Blue Sphere ones, always ended up giving me a run for my money, that's for sure. It would always end up boiling down that even though I have a pretty good path finding most of the blue spheres, I'd be missing like 1 or maybe 2 blue spheres at most. And for whatever reason, no matter what I did, no matter what path or turn I took, I was never able to locate them. Thankfully, I've gotten a little bit better and I've come up with some decent paths as far as these are concerned in order to make sure I'm able to get all of them. Here I get another perfect though, and now I gotta grab these 4, which are a bit difficult because of the bumpers all set up, especially with the increase of speed, but grabbing them all, we now have 5 Chaos Emeralds and have 2 more left to collect. Once we're out of the game here, we're going to hit this checkpoint. If we had hit a previous checkpoint, you could lose a life, and there was a way to get another one of the giant rings. But it's hard to do that if you don't end up hitting a previous checkpoint, lose a life, and it's just easier to keep on going this way. We still have plenty of other giant rings, but it's basically a way to try to get all of the giant rings as quick as possible if you really want to do that. Here we let this hand kind of grab us, and it ends up causing us to do a really fast run, and sends us flying in this direction where we're on this thing. We can kind of ride that over to the far right side. Going inside here, this giant fan starts sending Sonic. We're going to watch out for a couple of spikes that are lining on the ceiling, and it ends up sending us flying way, way, way up into the air. Do a spin dash and kind of go through this little tube. I always thought it was kind of a cool little thing there, and that leads us to the end of Act 1 here in Hydrocity Zone, where we have to face off with this guy here. After he comes down for a little bit, he'll then dash up into the air, and he comes down the far left side, goes up, and then comes back down the other side before eventually going into the center. After a few seconds, the rockets around him will slow up, and this will allow us to jump up in order to deliver a couple of hits to him. He then causes you to start spinning consistently, which if you don't have the bubble shield, it can potentially be a little bit dangerous if you hadn't previously jumped out of the water, but we're able to jump up now and finish him off with the last couple of hits to finish up Hydrocity Zone Act 1. As Act 2 begins, you start off by dropping down to this segment here, and after going to the right a little bit, when you pop out of the water here, you'll hit this checkpoint marker, and then the entire wall starts chasing you. You have to be very quick, but you don't want to be too fast that you end up running out of momentum and come down any of the slopes. So the best way to kind of do it is wait a little bit, stop completely, and then do a spin dash up the ramps themselves, and this will hopefully allow you to stay ahead of the wall that's coming in towards you. I died so many times at this spot as a kid, it wasn't funny. Then when we make it past that area, thankfully, we're out of the water and we can start working our way upwards, taking these big kind of slide down and then end up getting grabbed by another one of the giant weird hands and fly through a whole bunch of tubes before making it up to the top segment and another one of the checkpoint markers. Gonna take this path all the way to the right, get a lot of speed here. Which is really, of course, always a fun thing in Sonic, getting as much speed as we possibly can. Be careful not to get crushed while going up on these segments here. We're gonna use these fans to get all the way up. Not staying on there for too long so that we end up hitting those spikes on the ceiling, and then head on over to the left side. Once again, lots of speed that we get to pick up and send ourselves flying out of the water. And then we're going to do a spin dash, and another one of these hands grabs us and sends us up through the next tube area. Once up here, go inside this little alcove, and you can end up hitting the monitor for an invincibility thing. So you can use this to kind of run through a large portion here. Once again, just tons of speed. Now, when you pop out of the water here from this big burst of speed, hug the left button, and this way you'll be able to get into another one of these entrances, and thus another one of the blue sphere rings. After gathering this big group here, we're going to start heading down one of the many paths you can basically take. There's a decent amount of these like groups of 4 blue spheres, so you can kind of tell which areas you've already been to and which ones you haven't. If you don't have quite a direct path that you already have in mind, it's very easy to get turned around, especially during this one, because each chamber is very similar to one another. So we went the one path, got all of them through that, and now we're going to start heading down the other kind of side of the giant sphere here, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. After gathering all the rings here, we're going to head up here, grab these 4. We had already grabbed the other ones at the top portion there, and then grabbing these, we have another big open area where we're able to grab a whole bunch more of the blue spheres in this big kind of group. Now, we already have the perfect, which means basically we just have groups of the 4 that are left. So we're going to grab all of these here. And I'm going to do a nice little run through here, and I'll jump over this segment. Like I said, I'm far from smooth when it comes to making sure. I just want to make sure that I'm able to get all of the blue sphere games done. So there we go, we're able to grab the last couple of ones and finish up the Chaos Emerald. As we drop back in, we're going to use the blocks in order to head up here. Watch out for the spinning columns. When you jump on top of them, you start spinning yourself, but you can easily jump back off of them to make sure that you don't end up running into any of the spikes set up here. You can grab the invincibility monitor if you want to go ahead and grab that. We're going to use these fans to boost our way up and head on over to the right side. After hitting the big boost, we're going to head to the right here and hit another one of the checkpoint markers. You now have more of these spinning columns that you'll have to deal with. Once again, just stand on top of them, wait for the right moment, and then jump off of them before you end up crashing into the spikes. Pretty easy stuff here. Head to the left, get a lot of speed, and be able to ride across some of the water, which is a really cool effect of just being able to ride on top of the water during certain segments if you have enough speed. A big, huge boost, though, sends us out of the water, and right up here, if you stay on top of one of the columns and jumps into the wall, we're able to find another one of the blue sphere games, the big rings, and this is the final one here for Sonic 3. As long as we're able to, of course, complete it here. And this one's a bit different as far as being able to get all of the rings in order to get a perfect. A little bit more difficult for sure as far as getting them all to turn in. But you can see kind of how, even though we have already red spheres set up, if you're able to kind of get that square grid set up around it, the big square, you're able to turn even red spheres that were already red, that were never blue when you entered, also to turn into rings, which I just always thought was pretty cool, and it really allows you to kind of do a little bit of extra thinking when it comes to grabbing the blue spheres and which ones that you want to grab and not grab. Unfortunately, I end up making a mistake during this one, so I don't end up getting the perfect, but I get near perfect, basically, grabbing all of the rings. And now we have only 4 left to grab. Just gotta work our way around a couple of more turns and grab the last 4 blue spheres. And now we have the ability, after getting this and getting the last Chaos Emerald, we can turn into Supersonic at any point by getting 50 rings. And if we don't have another shield or invincibility item, if you have a shield, you aren't able to turn into Supersonic, because basically you just double jump, and that allows you to turn into Supersonic or use the special ability of whatever elemental shield you have. So I like the way that's done, though, because this allows me to control when I turn into Supersonic a bit better than necessarily in Sonic 2, where you kind of automatically turn into Supersonic if you jumped high up into the air when you got that 50 ring mark. Dropping down here, you'll run into Knuckles once again, who is going to end up hitting this big button and send us dropping down into the water below. From there, we gotta go flying through the tunnel, hit another checkpoint marker, but this takes us to the Robotnik boss for Hydrocity Zone. As Robotnik shows up, we're going to use the bouncing ability of the shield to kind of get up a little bit, and we can hit Robotnik a couple of times. Stay out of the way of all the bubbles that are rotating in that cyclone that's going, because you'll end up flying up into Robotnik himself and end up getting hurt by the fan below him. He's then going to throw out all these little bombs that end up causing little water things to shoot up. You can use these to kind of help you out as far as hitting Robotnik, but since we have the bubble shield, we're able to bounce up and easily hit Robotnik and defeat him, and we're moving on to Marble Garden. As we drop into Marble Garden Zone, I've always liked the design, the music and all for Marble Garden. I thought it had a pretty cool background that went along with it as well. And there's some cool, like, platforming and other things that are introduced during the segment here, like these weird blue things that you're able to kind of spin dash into in order to cause platforms to end up rising up so that you're able to climb. Interesting enough that Marble Garden Zone actually has a ton of giant rings in it, and in fact there's like 8 of them in the first act alone. It does require you to kind of hit certain checkpoints and die and go back to them and do different paths in order to get them all, but if you're actually pretty good at manipulating that, you could actually get every one of the Chaos Emeralds in Act 1 of Marble Garden alone, but I think since we already have that supersonic ability and all the Chaos Emeralds, we're not going to have to worry too much about that. This also happens to be the only zone in Sonic 3 that doesn't end up having any sort of water in it. You have those tar pits that you're able to kind of sink in and potentially die because of, but there's actually no water for Sonic to drown. But every one of the other zones in Sonic 3 has at least some bit of water that Sonic can end up falling in and potentially drown because of it. Just like with Sonic 2, Sonic 3 has a ton of different paths you can take a lot of times through certain levels. So whatever path I take may not necessarily even be the fastest path or the path that you would end up taking throughout the course of it. And that's what led to so much replayability playing through Sonic 3 and Sonic 2 and Knuckles throughout the years of finding different paths or trying to take intentionally different paths through the different zones in order to see different aspects of the stages. There's so much going on in each one of the zones and acts in all of the later retro Sonic games. Always thought it was cool to use these tops, and you can kind of use them to spin across and break open different walls and break open the floor of certain areas. In fact, you have to do so in order to kind of get your way through a couple of areas and make sure that you are able to progress. Like right here, we hit this one, we have to kind of ride it back down and hit it again. At that right spot, you're able to kind of send it flying if you want to, and that way you can crash into the ground at the right spots and break open the floors. Now here, though, it's interesting that we have to actually get off of it and then dash through the wall in order to make it into this segment after hitting our checkpoint and facing off with another one of the mini-bosses. We can use the electric shield to kind of do boosted jumps in order to land on them. Of course, pretty easy fight, though. You just want to make sure you don't land on the drills during the fight. But once he's taken care of, we've completed Act 1 here in Marble Garden. Now, as we begin Act 2, I got one of the flame shields for hitting the sign, or the sign landing at the mini-boss there, so I'm going to use that. Flame shield is easily my favorite, I think, just because, especially in Sonic and Knuckles, there's a lot of fire coming at you, and you can really use it to kind of help you out. When we go into here, we do end up running into Robotnik, who appears and drills through the ceiling, and this causes the entire level to kind of start shaking and changing a bit. Like, the paths change up, hills end up kind of collapsing, and allows us to go to different areas. Just another really, really cool effect. Be careful here, though. That crusher can end up squashing you. If you end up getting that top down there and you hit the ground at the right spot, you will send yourself flying to the right and can end up getting squashed. I died many times throughout the years by accidentally getting crushed by that particular spiky crush thing, I guess. taking a couple of different paths here, get another one of these spinny tops, and this will send us flying. And I love the fact you can hit the spring, bounce up, and then keep riding it and go all the way up to this segment here. Do a spin dash in order to cause these platforms to build up so that we're able to use them, and then grab onto these rings and kind of get pulled up. And just once again, really cool ideas as far as the level design and different things you're able to interact with throughout the stages, and also once again able to get quite a bit of speed during certain segments of Marble Garden. I also love that when you're in the fireball form, you're able to kind of like do that flying fireball charge, and it actually works pretty much the same as a spin dash. So you can do that and really bust through a few different rock formations and other walls, which is just another cool aspect of it. Here we have another one of those drill spinny platform things that we're able to kind of ride up and go through this weird tornado-like pattern up. I don't know exactly what's causing that to happen as far as physics are concerned, but it's still really cool to look at nonetheless. Have to do a couple of big jumps here, watching out for the spears or arrows that are coming out of the statues' mouths, but thankfully not too far after that I'm able to get another one of the flaming shields and use that to keep traveling through the level. Now here, when we make it to this spot, Dr. Robotnik shows up once again, drilling through the ceiling. The entire area starts to shake again, and after a few seconds we get control of Sonic, we're able to continue on. The whole landmass starts to kind of change and shift, allowing us to conveniently go through the next little bit of areas. Watch out for another crusher here and drop on down. Now when we make it over to the right just a little bit, we do have the ground itself start to go up. Once again, similar to Hydrocity, where we're running away from the wall. This time we're running away from the floor as it goes up. You just want to be careful that you don't end up getting crushed by any of the ceiling areas. Thankfully not too long of a whole area though that you have to kind of deal with, but still got to be careful nonetheless. Once you make it up, continue along the path and bust on through this wall, and this will lead us though to the next battle against Robotnik himself. Now as he appears, after a few seconds he'll drill through the ground, causing him to completely go away, and now we start basically flying, because Tails grabs us and we're able to use Tails to help us in order to take out Dr. Robotnik. Now, interestingly enough, the game glitches if you have Hypersonic at this part. Hypersonic is what you get if you end up getting all the Chaos Emeralds and Super Emeralds from Sonic and Knuckles. The game just seemingly cannot handle it if you have that. But what you can do is use Tails to help you easily jump onto Robotnik and finish him off. Really kind of just cool little battle here, and after hitting the capsule, we're moving on to Carnival Night Zone. Now, Carnival Night should be one of my favorites. I love carnival-themed stuff, but it's honestly always was the stuff of nightmares in some ways, because of a very tricky spot in Act 2 that we'll be getting to. Very easy now once you know what to do with it, but as a kid it used to drive me insane for sure. Lots of cool little gimmicks here. It's very similar to Casino Night Zone in Sonic 2 as far as just the bumpers, the chaos, the neon lights going. And that's probably another reason why I did, for the most part, like Carnival Night. Just don't like it quite as much as I like Casino Night from Sonic 2. What I think ends up making Carnival Night so fun is just the amount of different types of platforms you're able to use. From the giant wheels, you have balloons, you have corkscrew slides, you have just all kinds of really interesting and creative ways that you're able to progress. You have like these giant towers like these ones that remind me of giant bug zappers. You're able to kind of like hang on, and just really cool animation. Sonic Team did a great job at just making so many really cool platforms, as well as ways for Sonic to interact with these different platforms as you go through the level. A little bit ways in, we finally make it though to the end of Act 1. We have to deal with the boss here. Pretty cool boss. You have this guy here who comes down with a rotating spiky top on the bottom part of him that bounces around. But if you hit the robot himself, he ends up causing this appendage to kind of come out, and you can actually use the spiky spinning top to bounce into it in order to do damage to him. Once you're able to hit him a few times though, he's defeated, and we're moving on to Act 2 here in Carnival Night Zone. As we enter now into Carnival Night Act 2, we do have a fire shield, but it won't last too long because there is a bunch of water that's right near the beginning, and then not too far into the level we end up going through some water. Now when you're in the water here though, instead of having the bubbles that give you the giant bubbles, instead you're able to hit balloons, and the balloons will actually give you big bubbles that you can end up getting your extra bit of oxygen if you want to do so. But thankfully most of the underwater segments during Carnival Night Act 2 are relatively easy to kind of deal with as we're kind of progressing through the stage. Watch out for some spikes and bump around a whole bunch of different bumpers. And then we have to do a couple of big time jumps on this platform here, and this will allow us to travel upwards. Grab a 10 ring monitor before using the cannon to bounce along the balloons and upwards on the bumpers to get to the top portion here. Now, when we make it to this segment here, you'll have to go up and down using this platform thing, and you can use it to help get you a little bit higher up in order to grab these monitors. Now, we can also use this to help us get even higher up in order to get to the platform above. Now, if you do jumps, nicely timed jumps, you can kind of manipulate it so that you're able to kind of get up here regardless. But you're actually supposed to use the up and down buttons, and that's something that always confused me. It's something I never understood when I was younger, like what you were supposed to do there. A little bit ways in, we do run into Knuckles, who once again hits a switch. No surprise at this point. And this causes the power to actually go out inside of the amusement park. We do have to drop down into the water, so once again we do end up losing our fire shield. But now we can keep traversing underwater through the next little bit here. Make sure that you pop some of the balloons and make sure you get a little bit of oxygen if you need it along the way, so that you don't end up completely running out of oxygen and drown here with Sonic. It can be a little bit difficult to kind of get through some of these areas because of all the bumpers and the springs. The water does drain a little bit ways in though, so it makes it a tad bit easier to kind of maneuver your way through. Now we could go left here, but we're just gonna hit up and down on the platform to get down to the water a little easier. You don't really have to do it that way if you don't want to. Watch out for these bumpers so you don't get sent backwards, and then continue on through. Thankfully, the bumpers don't crush you, because there's a couple of times with the rotating bumpers that could squash Sonic potentially, but you just kind of go through them, unlike a lot of the other platforms and obstacles throughout the course of the game. Here we're going to get another one of the electricity styles of shields, and use that to kind of get our way over to the next segment here. Lots of different platforms and all. Just trying to get our way through as quick as we can. We can use this to kind of get over and hit this switch, which will turn back on power. It really doesn't affect all that much, in honesty, but it'll at least allow us to see things a little bit easier. Now this is the platform. This is the giant barrel that is a pain in the butt, and the one I got stuck on. Because unlike the other one that we did earlier, that you could technically keep jumping on in order to kind of get through, you can't do that with that one. You have to do up and down on the D-pad. And I remember even having to call a Sega hotline to help me as a kid, because I obviously was not too bright at figuring out. I just kept trying to jump and jump and jump some more in order to get through that segment, but I never was able to. But eventually, finally, after calling the Sega help hotline or whatever it was, we were able to kind of figure it out and finally get through that segment, and then didn't have any problems with the rest of Sonic 3 or even Sonic and Knuckles later on. After a pretty big speedy area, we drop down. Here's Knuckles again, who hits the switch and sends us flying all the way up to the top. This sends us flying upwards into the Robotnik battle for Carnival Night Zone. Now, we're going to use the electric shield to bounce up and hit Robotnik easily. Basically, all he does is he drops this green sphere and then picks it up using electricity, which can end up hitting you and hurting you. But we're just going to kind of cheese it a little bit, use the electric shield, bounce on top of him a bunch, and move on to the next zone of the game. Now next up is Ice Cap Zone, one of my favorites for sure. It has an awesome music, great beginning with Sonic on the snowboard, but interestingly enough, it wasn't supposed to be the next zone after Carnival Night Zone. Since this and Sonic and Knuckles were supposed to be one game, you were actually supposed to eventually make your way to Flying Battery Zone that's in Sonic and Knuckles, and that level would lead you into Ice Cap Zone. So this level wasn't technically supposed to be next, but we get to do it in Sonic 3, and it's a great level with an awesome song to go along with it. As we begin the level, we're dropping down a couple of slidey platforms. It's a little bit like Labyrinth Zone as far as the beginning goes, just kind of going down a couple of those slanted slides. And then right after that, though, we're into the main stage itself. Some cool enemies in Ice Cap Zone, including the penguin guys, as well as the spherical enemies with the spiky balls around them, kind of an homage to some of the enemies from the original Sonic 1. These platforms here, you can use the spring or do a spin dash at the right moment in order to kind of get them to propel upwards so that you're able to get to the upper platforms here. Here we're going to ride on through, sliding our way down a little bit of a slope. Then when we get to this platform, you have to kind of wait for these giant pillars to kind of go up and down to kind of sneak our way on through. Hitting the switches to break open a bunch of icy platforms, and as we drop down, we're going to hug right on the D-pad to land here. Once on this platform down below, we're going to push over to the right, this big platform, and then ride it in order to kind of go across. Now you can normally just go over here, but you won't be able to break through these walls, which allows us to progress through the level. Once you do that, we're going to continue on, break open some ice, and hit another one of the switches to kind of keep on moving through the level. Once down here, do a big spin dash, and then you can bounce off the spring and keep doing this, and you can hit more of these kind of platforms we already dealt with earlier, but we'll be using them here in order to keep moving on up through the stage. When you hit the one here, though, it will break apart, and once it does break apart, you'll land on this platform. You'll be outside, out in the open. Cool background going on here, though, with all the little ice blocks moving along the water, and you make it to the mini-boss here, the Act 1 boss. Now, this guy always reminded me a little bit of a snowman, maybe just in the face of the robot itself. I don't know why. He summons a whole bunch of ice balls to go around him, and then he'll throw them off of him, staying in the upper right corner, and then the ice balls will fall on down. A few moments later, he'll summon more towards him, and then go across the screen. This gives us enough opportunity to deliver hits to him in order to finish him off and move on to Act 2. As we begin Act 2, we start off with a big ramp, though. We're able to get an electric shield, which will help us out as we continue on through the stage here. Another thing I always thought was cool with Sonic 3 was the fact that even though you have the multiple playable characters, they don't do the exact same portions of stages. If you play as just Knuckles, you'll actually enter into different areas of levels. And the same goes even with Tails a little bit, where you'll enter into a few different areas of stages if you're just playing as him, which just adds a bit more to the replayability. One cool thing with the electric shield is you actually can destroy the spiky balls that are rotating around their spherical enemies, so another cool thing about having the electric shield. You also may notice the Robotnik monitors. What's cool is actually they were supposed to be in the original Sonic 1, but ended up getting cut late in development, but they actually are still in the coding. If you end up hitting those Dr. Robotnik monitors, though, they just end up causing you to get a hit, so you'll lose all your rings, or end up, I think, potentially dying if you end up hitting one if you have no rings in your arsenal at that time. When we make it over here to the right, though, it's time for another one of the Robotnik bosses. We're going to use the electric shield to bounce our way up in order to hit him. For the most part, he's a pretty simple boss. He has his extension that it comes down and ends up causing ice to spew out of both the top part of it as well as the left and right sides. You can use it as a platform to jump up in order to hit him, and after delivering enough hits, though, it will break off and he'll start spewing ice from both the left side or right side of him as well as below him. Delivering enough hits, though, he's taken care of, and we're moving on to the next zone of the game. This zone happens to be, though, Launch Base Zone, which is the final zone of Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Launch Base Zone is definitely one of my least favorites. I've never really been into kind of like the final stages of some of the acts and all, but one thing I really thought was cool was just the giant death egg, or whatever it is, in the background of the stage. There is still some cool stuff, even though it wasn't necessarily one of my favorites. Plenty of death, though, awaits you during the course of the act. There's plenty of things that are going to try to crush you, spikes, spherical enemies, and some other hazards along the way. As we enter inside of here, you'll have to hit this button on the far left side, which will cause the platform bridge type thing to form, and then we can get in these giant teacup-like things, and we can use them to kind of ride up to top portions. I always thought it was cool, though, that you end up getting launched out of one and sent flying into the far right wall. Sonic's perfectly okay, he doesn't even take damage from doing so, but still kind of a cool little thing that ends up happening. Over here, hit another one of those buttons, which does cause the bridge to go up, but allows us to get a few different items. And then we can hit this one up here in order to get the bridge to reform, and we can continue over to the left side of the screen here. Once we drop down here, you can hit a monitor for a couple more rings if you do want to, or just ride up the platform and continue on the level. Even in a level like this, the final stage of Sonic 3, you're able to still get a pretty good amount of speed through certain areas. Here I'm going to enter inside the bonus game. I haven't really shown any of the bonus games. This one is very much like the Casino Night slot machine. I'm just going to hit it one time and then end up going into one of the exits, but I did want to at least show it for a few moments here. Thankfully, most of the level itself is pretty straightforward. We don't have to really worry about too much as long as we're making progress, watching out for the sphere enemies, fire. We can ride this hook across. I love the fact that we can jump into this thing and shoot our way up to the top here. You have the couple of alarms that kind of go off, which are cool, but basically all it does is end up summoning a hummingbird-like robot that comes after you. Still pretty easy to deal with overall. Here we're going to jump inside this capsule, and this will take us all the way through to another segment of the stage. Be careful not to get crushed or jump on top of the spiky thing, and then drop right on down into another one of the exact same capsules, taking us to a little bit farther on into the stage. Here we end up nearing the end of act number 1. We ride up here and Knuckles shows up in order to throw a bomb and blowing up the entire building that we're inside. Knuckles really doesn't give a crap in this game, that's for sure. Blows up the entire building and it starts to fall apart before we end up jumping out to safety and then watch the building collapse behind us. We get a checkpoint and then we're jumping into the boss battle for act number 1 here. We have this robot with a couple of spinning maces around him. Wait for the right opportunity between the spinning mace balls in order to deliver damage to the robot. Pretty easy fight overall. After you hit him a couple of times, it'll destroy one arm, making him even easier to deal with. Once he's done though, we're moving on to act 2. As Act 2 begins, we're going to jump into another one of those teacup-like things and ride that down. We now have a series of pipes that we're going to be able to slide across. As you can see, the background has changed up with a couple of like pyramid rock formations that are going on in the background. Hit this spring and fly our way all the way up to this top portion before we end up making it to another checkpoint marker. We can grab onto this hook and keep bouncing our way along these pipes for a little bit of time. Drop down here, watching out for the flame shooters from the different platforms, and when you get up here you can hit this button contraption thing, which will cause the bridge to go up and you can drop on down to the platform below. Here we go through a couple of different pipes and go pretty fast for a few seconds at least before dropping down into the water below. You won't be into the water for too long, but just be careful of a couple of spikes and other enemies as we go through this segment here. A little bit ways, we end up hitting this pipe and go really fast through it. When we end up coming out of the pipe though, we end up nearing an invincibility monitor we can grab. This will help us speed through a few of the next little segments. Jumping to another one of the teacups in a few moments. We can ride that down to the platform below if you want to. You can technically kind of jump through that and ignore it if you want, but still always fun to ride those things. Big ramp ends up leading us up here into another couple of the teacups, which just basically travel us back and forth, but eventually send us flying over to the far right and crashing into another wall. Pretty funny animation overall though. Watch out for the laser-like colors that are coming down, and you can go inside the pipe that you break open here, ride through a large portion of that, and end up popping out and continuing on over to the right side here. Decent amount of speed that we're able to kind of gain here, but we're going to get up to this top part and make sure we grab the hook. I ended up going backwards and having to bounce my way back, but grab the hook in order to travel on down to the bottom part here. If you end up flying up here, you can grab yourself a 10-ring monitor, and then Dr. Robotnik will jump into this machine, and for this battle, it's pretty simple. He has this platform that will come out and send a cannonball flying. When the platform's out, you're able to jump up and easily hit Robotnik. He has one cannonball come out the top and then one come out the bottom. If you time your jumps while on the platforms, you can easily avoid the cannonballs altogether and easily take him out and get inside of one of his own little egg vehicles. After seeing the funny little cutscene with Knuckles punching the machine and falling off the platform, we make it here where we have to battle Robotnik. He has a machine that will come up the right side. You can easily jump on it, avoiding the spike and lasers, and deliver quite a few hits to him. After doing that, he'll then come back down the right side, a little bit slower, firing lasers and all, but we can still end up landing on him a couple of more times. He'll then come up the opposite side and repeat the process, but thankfully we're able to deliver enough hits to him in order to defeat him. Now, as far as this game is concerned, that's the end of Sonic 3, and now we transition ourselves into Sonic and Knuckles. As we enter into the Sonic and Knuckles portion of the game, we drop into Mushroom Hill Zone. A few steps in, we run into Knuckles, who's hiding something from us. This ends up being the lair of the Super Chaos Emeralds. Interestingly enough, Mushroom Hill Zone actually has enough big rings to get all 8 of the Chaos Super Emeralds in the first 2 acts here. The thing is, though, in the regular Sonic & Knuckles, you don't have this segment here, where you end up seeing Knuckles and get this little bonus area that doesn't exist, so you don't have this big ring. But other than that, you can actually get 7 of the Super Chaos Emeralds in Sonic & Knuckles very easily. Now, when you come here, though, you end up getting to pick which of the giant Super Chaos Emeralds you want to complete. So, I'm just going to kind of do them in a random order in order to do them. The exact same type of minigame is here with the blue sphere game, with your goal being to collect all of the blue spheres without running into any of the red spheres. Along the way, of course, Sonic will speed up a little bit in order to make things more difficult. You can also get perfects as far as the levels are concerned by getting all of the potential rings throughout the course of the blue sphere games, but trust me, I will not be doing much of that. The Sonic and Knuckles ones are a lot tougher as far as being able to get those perfect, so I won't be doing a ton of that throughout the course of these Super Chaos Blue Sphere levels. After getting all the blue spheres, though, and a perfect, for this one at least, we get the first of our Super Chaos Emeralds. I always like the fact, though, when you get a Super Chaos Emerald, you kind of go back to the chamber where all of them are located, and get to see the color return to whichever one of the Super Chaos Emeralds blue sphere levels you just completed. Just a nice little touch to getting them. As we drop back down in the Mushroom Hill Zone, head outside of the chamber. We can close it back up if you want to. No really reason to, but just kind of cool that you can. We're going to do our best to get all of the Chaos Super Emeralds during the course of Mushroom Hill, though. We can get a bunch of them in Act 1 and a few more in Act 2 to finish it up. To do this, though, we're going to have to take a pretty specific path on through the level. Heading up here, though, and use this machine to kind of move your way up. You have to hit down on it in order to use it. If you have Tails with you, he kind of hinders your progress with it. It's a bit weird. Hit this thing here and it'll send you flying upwards onto this platform. You can then use this to fling your way over to the right side into another one of the giant rings. And once we get back in, we're now going to do the one just to the right of the teleporter that took us here. Pretty cool design blue sphere level, though, for the most part. Go inside here, we can get a few of the giant squares in order to get a decent amount of rings throughout the course of this whole blue sphere game. Also like the whole purple and yellow checker pattern that we have throughout this level as well. A lot of the Chaos Emerald ones from Sonic & Knuckles involve the springs, the yellow spheres, so you kind of get used to how long they spring you and hitting the right ones at the right moments in order to make sure that you land safely and don't end up landing either into a bumper or end up landing into a red sphere. Here between these sets of springs, though, we're able to get quite a lot of blue spheres and gather a lot of rings. And now we have only a couple more blue spheres to grab. After leaving that big ring, we're going to continue on our way through Mushroom Hill Zone. It won't be too much farther though as we take this particular path in order to run into another one of the giant rings. After taking out the ones to the left and the right of the teleporter, we're going to now take the one in the top center here and jump inside. Start off by immediately jumping inside of the bumpers and grabbing a whole bunch of blue spheres here and a whole bunch of rings in the process. After gathering up all those rings, we're going to head out this way, and you have a couple of these cross-like patterns throughout the course of this particular blue sphere game. We can grab them, hit this spring, and send us flying over to the right, which will lead us to a bunch more blue spheres conveniently in another square pattern, so we're able to turn them all into rings. We're then going to hit another spring and do the exact same once hitting that spring. Like I said early on in the video though, I don't have the perfect pattern for doing most of these, so I just kind of wing it and learned and mastered them the way I was able to. So they may not exactly be the most direct way and easiest way sometimes for doing the blue sphere games. My goal was just to be able to complete them all in a single go. Down to 13 though, just over here, we have another set of them, and we're able to hit those, now leaving us with only 4 blue spheres left. Work our way along the pattern, and we can grab these last 4 that are in this cross pattern. This also ends up giving us a perfect when we hit the ring in the center between them. Back in Mushroom Hill, continuing along our way, going through a couple of loops and working our way along the vine. Now when we get up here, we're going to jump off of the vine to the right. This will allow us to go into another path that will lead us to another one of the big rings just a few moments later. I know, not much of the level we're completing before getting into all these big rings, but thankfully this will allow us to go through the rest of the zones in the game in a pretty leisurely fashion, not having to worry about the Super Chaos Emeralds, since we'll already have them in our possession. Here's another one where we have a lot of springs that we're going to have to use at the right moments in order to help us get over areas and get to where the other blue spheres are located. Here we can kind of hit these 2 that are located here in order to turn the whole big group of them into rings. Always very helpful to be able to do that and just make things a tad bit easier as we're gathering all the blue spheres. As you've noticed throughout the course of doing the blue spheres, a lot of areas of the levels look almost identical to one another, and the only way you're able to really tell if you've already been to that spot is if they're red spheres or if there's no spheres at all. So you kind of get used to the ways you've gone and kind of try to stick to certain directions to make sure that you're able to get through these areas. Only a couple more blue spheres for us left to grab. We're going to hit this spring, get to this big group located here, grabbing a whole bunch more rings, leaving us with only 6 more blue spheres left to gather. From there, head on over. We gotta watch out for a couple of red spheres we've already gathered, and jump over a couple of gaps, And there we go, grab the last couple of ones, and another Super Chaos Emerald has been acquired. Now that we're back in Mushroom Hill, though, we're going to finish up Act 1, though, finally, before jumping into any more of the big rings to get more Chaos Emeralds. Not too far from where we are there, there's another one of the checkpoints, another big loop. Before we make it to the Lumberjack robot, be careful of the flame below him. If you have a fire shield, though, you can easily just keep jumping on into him. Basically, during this segment, they just wait for him to kind of chop the wood, and you're able to jump up in front of where the flames are, and able to easily deal damage to them and beat them. A little bit ways into Act 2, though, Knuckles shows up again to send us flying into another portion of Mushroom Hill, and it's kind of cool, though. You have kind of an autumn version of Mushroom Hill here. Taking the path that we're going to, though, we're working our way towards more of the giant rings. Hit this right here, and this will send you flying upwards into the right, and you're able to land on this mushroom platform, bounce off the spring, and lead yourself here. This is another one of the giant rings, and another blue sphere game. Now this one is a really cool one. You have a lot of these big square lines that you have to do, and you have a very strict pattern that you can take to easily complete the stage. This is one of, if not the only, blue sphere game that I take a very strict pattern as far as completing it. Here, when you make it to the end of the square, you'll make a jump over the last red sphere, aka the first one that we ended up grabbing, and this will allow us to hit a spring, which will send us right into the next safe area in order to get into another big square. Now, this part right here, where we go into another square, we're going to jump over, and we're in a little bit of an open area, follow this around, and hit another spring. This will take us to a little bit of a smaller area in order to get all of the blue spheres. But once again, another one of these springs will be right in front of us, and we can do the same here for the last couple of blue spheres. Very quick, I know, going through that, but a pretty easy once you know the exact pattern to take, and you're able to get another Super Chaos Emerald. As we work our way once again through Mushroom Hill, taking the path here, going through a couple of quick loops, hitting this spring after going past another one of these checkpoints, drop on down, we can hit this spring and it'll send us flying upwards right into the path of another one of the giant rings. Thankfully, only a couple more blue sphere games left. As we start off this one, we have two big squares, one to one side and one to the other. Nice, easy way to start us off here, but things definitely get a little bit more complicated a little bit farther into this blue sphere game. After grabbing these rings, we're going to jump off to the side here and go through this cross. Now, if you time it right, you're supposed to be able to jump and get one side of it so the center is not grabbed, but unfortunately I screwed up a little bit, so I kind of have to manipulate these bumpers in order to get through, but thankfully, safely, I'm able to do so, though I don't recommend doing it that way. We then hit this spring, and this will send us off, and we bounce off this bumper going backwards, and after going backwards we hit another bumper, and then we turn. It's kind of a weird sensation going backwards for a few steps, but mastering it will really help make this particular blue sphere game a heck of a lot easier. From where we are now, though, we're going to go down here, jump on this spring, do another one of those backward steps, and then turn on into this set, and grab another big kind of cross of blue spheres. But hitting the one set of blue spheres turns a whole big group in the middle into rings. We now just kind of have to go into this upper corner, and we're going to hit another spring, which will send us into another backwards walk, and then make a nice turn right. Grab these last couple of rings by jumping over the blue sphere, but bouncing off the bumper and going right into the last couple of rings and the last blue sphere. After leaving that blue sphere game, we're going to bounce off of this mushroom and head up. After hitting a checkpoint, we have another one of those machines. We're going to be able to pull on the handle to work our way up. Tails is trying to help, but pretty much just makes this whole process a bit slower. Watch out for the rooster robot that's kind of set up. Basically a weather vane with a rooster attached to it, but he ends up causing you to kind of fall off platforms by blowing you away, so be careful of that. Then continue over, hit this spring, and then bounce off this spring down to this segment right here. After watching out for another one of those weather vane rooster type of things, you can hit the last of the big rings here in the Mushroom Hill, and thus the last one we need for the last Super Chaos Emerald. A lot of last there, but still, either way, we're going to start off by hitting all of the blue spheres in the opening area. Once we've done that, though, we're going to head over here after hitting the spring and go right. Going through this segment here, grab this big group of blue spheres in the center here. Once we gather those rings, head over to the next part, and we have another group of 9 blue spheres that we're easily able to grab. Now that we have those, though, we're going to go up here and go through this segment. This basically takes us right back to where we were just a few moments ago. We're able to gather a bunch of individual blue spheres, hit a big line of blue spheres here, jump inside this set of bumpers, and go out the opposite side where we're able to keep gathering more blue spheres. Jump back here, hit another one of the springs, and then spring off the next direction, the immediate left. This will take us into the other segment we hadn't traveled to, and the final set of blue spheres that we needed in order to grab the last of the Super Chaos Emeralds. Now we're able to turn into Hypersonic. Basically, it's just Supersonic, but with a few more sparkles going around him. This also ends up unlocking the true best ending and final areas for Sonic 3 and Knuckles. We're going to continue on now through Mushroom Hill. We only have to really worry about completing the levels now. We have the Hypersonic ability now unlocked already, and don't have to worry about that part at least. Just a little bit ways in, though, I will end up turning into Hypersonic. You can drop into this wall here and find another one of the giant rings. This will be the 7th one during Sonic and Knuckles, but it's our 8th one, and since we already have all the Chaos Emeralds, we don't have to worry about it, but finding an extra one of the big rings gives you a big boost in your actual ring count. Now, I'm going to do my best not to turn into Hypersonic very much, probably only a couple of times throughout the course of the run. I always like to prefer to listen to the actual stage music instead of the Hypersonic or Supersonic music, but I wanted to at least show him off a couple of times. Adopt the Robotnik boss here for the end of Mushroom Hill is extremely easy with Hypersonic. Without him, though, you do have to watch out for the barriers that are set up between the trees and make sure that you're able to keep pace with him in order to deliver the hits and beat him in order to move on to the next zone. Now, after Mushroom Hill, we end up in Flying Battery Zone. One of the highlights of Sonic and Knuckles for sure. Great music and a pretty good design. Actually, my favorite of the mechanical type zones as far as the classic Sonic games are concerned. After dropping down the first platform, we end up getting hit by a flame, but we're then going to grab these handlebars and we can ride the last one down here to the next little segment and then do the same right after that with the next set of bars. Head to the right here, and you can use these platforms in order to kind of progress. Be careful not to fall down here, though, because there is a big open gap at the bottom, which will cause an instant death if you end up falling down into it. Go to the left after hitting the checkpoint marker and go through the big tube. And then going to jump on this right here, and it'll spring you up into the air, and this will allow you to continue on to the next segment. Here you have this set of platforms that kind of make their way through a tube in a pattern, and you can actually ride on top of them in order to kind of get across a few of the areas here. Here I have to wait just a few moments for it to bypass, and then I can get over here to the left side. Some of the capsules that you'll find throughout are actually fake capsules that contain a few enemies that you may have to deal with. Watch out for the spinning blades, but you can grab a hold of the bars that they're on, and then use them to kind of fling your way over to the right or left side. Down here, jump over the little thing that will send you flying up the ramp, and you can go inside. Very reminiscent of Winged Fortress Zone from Sonic 2. After hitting the switch, we're going to drop on down. You'll see these electrical fields on the ceiling. They pull these metal balls towards them. And of course, you run into them, you'll end up getting damaged, but sometimes they actually pull enemies towards them as well, and you can kind of take them out if you want to. Getting the invincibility monitor on the right side will help out for a couple of moments, as we're able to go now back to the left side and work our way up a series of ramps, including this spinning thing, and use that to get onto this platform safely here and bounce off the fake capsule, but thankfully this time it's a spring instead of actually having enemies. Go through the rotating gate over to the right, and it'll cause this platform to break apart. Another electricity field is set up right after that, and we can hit the spring to bounce up a couple of layers with a few of those springs. When you make it up here, though, we gotta wait a few moments, though, for these things to drop back down, and you can use these giant spike ball or half spike mace balls in order to get your way up, since the electricity pulls them upwards, and you can basically just use them as elevated platforms. After using another one of the spiky platforms, we use one of the fake capsules to spring our way up and eventually outside of the ship. Head over to the right here, you can watch out for a couple of rotating mace ball things around, and then when you make it to this spot here, you have to wait a few seconds for these missiles to drop down from the sky. They'll parachute down and actually cause a hole in the ground to appear, so you're able to drop down and back inside of the ship. Here we go very slowly around one of the big giant cage cylinders before we make it to the boss of the stage. This is another fake capsule robot, but for this fight what you have to do is stand on top of him, and it'll cause the mace balls to then swing at Sonic, or whoever you're playing as, and you can then have to get out of the way real quickly in order for him to hit himself. It's a very easy, simplistic type of fight, kind of a cool design though nonetheless, and once he's done we're moving on to Act 2 here in Flying Battery. Act 2 has a lot of the same stuff that we were dealing with in Act 1 here in Flying Battery. Watch out for a couple of landmines, and then grab onto one of these handles, and just make sure that you watch out for the spikes when you end up descending there. We're going to grab one of the electric shields in order to help us out. You have to be very careful during the next few segments. You have these things going down these big pillars. It's very easy to end up getting squashed if you're not quick enough in order to get off of them, as well as even getting onto the platforms themselves, because of the hit detention's always been a little bit with some of this, or basically the squish detection, I guess. In the classic Retro Sonic games, you can accidentally get squashed. It's something that even is prevalent in Sonic Mania, which of course is a great throwback to classic Sonic, and I can't recommend it enough for Sonic fans if for some reason you haven't played it yet. But it even has some of those same kind of squishy issues that could potentially end up coming up. Like I mentioned before, I love the fire shield. It's one of my favorites, especially in Sonic and Knuckles. It seems to be even more useful than even in Sonic 3, just because there are so many enemies firing out fire-based attacks, and because of that, you're able to completely negate the damage. When you make it to Lava Reef later on in the game, it's especially useful. You can just stand in the lava and just have fun. It's
Kind of breaks the game, but still kind of fun to do it. Wait a few moments for the electricity to pull these things up so that you can make it through, and then we're going to do a quick dash using the fireball in order to kind of get through that area. But once again, you have to be very careful. I'm risking getting squashed a good amount of times here throughout the course of trying to get through this area quickly. Ride these up and you can kind of jump your way over, and this will allow you to get here. Wait for the spider to come down, very much an homage to Sonic 2 spiders from the Chemical Plant Zone, but you can actually use these ones to help you out and get across the little gap there. Continue on, hit another one of these switches and drop down. We'll get to another checkpoint marker. Be careful when you're getting onto this platform. Pretty decent amount of space though for you to be able to ride on up. Wait a few moments for the electricity to pull these up so you're able to get to the top platform, and you'll make it to the boss encounter here. Now for this boss, it's really a non-boss. You basically just have to survive. Just moving back and forth, and every so often the laser above you will stop and fire a big giant laser down, and after you've dodged enough of them, and the field that you're battling in will start to shrink more and more as you do so, after doing this for a while, you'll eventually beat it and be able to move on. After that fight is over though, the integrity of the ship itself is called into question, and now we have the ground starting to rise up. Similar to being chased by the wall in Hydrocity Zone in Sonic 3's part of the game, we now have to be careful not to end up getting squashed by it as we go up. Here is a good example of having to wait for it. Now when it does come up, it does pull you. As you can see, it's going in a direction to the right, and this can cause Sonic to be pulled in that direction and potentially get squashed. So you still have to be a little bit careful when dealing with this whole segment. After it rises for a while, though, it's time for the boss battle against Robotnik. Here you have him with two spiky arms, and then he'll be shooting up fire from below. Since we have the fire shield, we can just stand directly in the line of the fire. Still a pretty easy fight even without the fire shield, you just have to dodge him, and after dodging enough of the fire, he will start to kind of swing himself up and down, and this will allow you to then deliver the rest of the hits that you need in order to defeat him and move on to the next zone. Next up is Sandopolis Zone. I'm always a big fan of desert-themed levels in classic platform games, and Sandopolis is actually completely different from Act 1 to Act 2. A lot of people out there don't like Act 2 of Sandopolis, and I completely understand why. Even though I was never really someone who ended up hating it, it's very different. It's a different kind of level, and not the kind I usually like in a classic Sonic game for sure, but Act 2 isn't as bad, to me at least, as certain other acts from classic Sonic. No surprise that Sandopolis is filled with sand. You'll have quicksand that will pull you in. You have these sand waterfalls that you can actually jump in and use to help get you to higher platforms. You also have the giant waterfall kind of things like this, where the sand's going downwards and you kind of can ride it, similar to either the ice from Ice Cap Zone or even the waterfalls from the Labyrinth Zone in Sonic 1. Use the waterfall here, though, to kind of keep up in order to get over the spiky platform. Drop on down here and be quick about getting out of the quicksand, and that way you'll be able to get up to this segment here. You have these big pillars of sand from time to time that pop out. They don't end up hurting you. They basically are just a nuisance. They stop you for a few moments. Here we can use the sand waterfall to get ourselves up, and then you have this kind of thing here, this cliffhanger-esque thing you're able to grab on and then propel your way slowly down the wall into a few segments. Then we can push this block over to the right, and it'll get along a track and start to slowly move, and you can actually ride on top of it in order to get over to the right side. It's not something that you absolutely have to do, but still cool that you can. Spring upwards and jump up the big waterfall, jump into this platform, and this will allow you to get up to another checkpoint marker before getting to another one of these things where we're going to be propelling our way down as Sonic. After getting down to this platform, we're then going to push this rock like we did before, and then use this to ride across this little gap to the right. Along the way, you then can jump onto this platform that's rotating back and forth, and you can use that to kind of help you get over. Over here, we're going to hit a couple of these springs and send us into this building to the right. There's a giant ring floating in the air right off of this platform, and I'm going to end up turning into Hypersonic. I didn't want to overuse it, but I figured here's another level. I can just go ahead and use it for a little bit of time. Not really effective really to use it on the boss because you have to kind of wait for the boss to take care of himself. But still, I figured why not go ahead and do at least a little bit more Hypersonic since I spent all that time gathering those emeralds. Now, since we are Hypersonic, I'm just gonna jump down the platforms and not have to worry about doing any of the propelling, but that'll take us down here where you'll see the giant pyramid start to rise in the background. That's of course where we're going to end up in Act 2, but before we go into Act 2, of course we do have a mini-boss to deal with. Now this boss is a golem boss that ends up reforming after you deliver hits to him. Basically he's a rock, he turns into a giant golem, and then if you attack him in the head you can destroy him and he'll turn back into just a regular rock, but then a few moments later he'll reform. The only way to actually defeat him is by luring him over to the far left side. So we just kind of have to wait. It'll take a little bit, but eventually he'll keep following us, and then we just kind of have to trick him into the actual quicksand, and that'll beat him, and we'll move on to Act number 2. Sandopolis has a couple of things going on in it. First off, as you notice, it's pretty dark until we hit one of these things and turns on all the torches in the background. Not only do you want the light on to see, as we get a little bit farther into the level, we end up hitting a capsule that frees these ghosts. Once the screen starts to dim and you wait too long, the ghost will actually start to appear on screen and eventually attack Sonic. So you want to do your best to keep the ghost at bay by consistently hitting the switches. Most of the level consists, unfortunately, of hitting these lever things, pushing them, these big barrels, and this will cause the different gates to open up or go down in whatever way, and allowing you to pass, but you have to be very quick about it. Because of this whole mechanic and the ghosts themselves, a lot of people aren't a big fan of Sandopolis Act 2, which I fully get. I've always enjoyed going pretty fast throughout a lot of the levels, so the ghosts don't usually end up being too much of a nuisance for me. But it's still, you know, under pressure of being able to hit the things and keep on trucking through the level. I always make sure that if all possible, hit as many of those switches or levers or whatever, pull on them in order to make sure the lights stay on for as long as I possibly can. Even inside the pyramid, we have these things to propel ourselves down a few of these different areas. And the space and time that you have to kind of get through gets, of course, longer and longer the farther you make it in the level. So you have to be really quick about hitting the switch all the way and then quickly going through the area that you need to get through the gate before it ends up reclosing. We're going to wait a few moments for the spikes to go back up so that we have the most amount of time. Thankfully, we can grab this and turn those lights back on. Now, when you make it here, you'll hit this thing and sand will start to fill up the area. You have to be careful. Once again, there's still things that can end up causing you to die because of the sand, but we're going to basically use this to kind of ride our way upwards to higher areas. Eventually, the sand will stop, but we'll have more sand to deal with in just a little bit. Hit this and then drop on down to go quickly through this area, and then we're going to hit this piece of sand spewing thing, and then start riding up the giant hills of sand once again. Pick up a pair of the fast shoes from one of the monitors. Not that it really can go that fast right now, considering we have to wait for the sand. We're at the mercy of the sand, so they put a perfect place for that speed-up shoe for sure. You have to be very careful, though, and quickly push this so that you'll be able to get through before that sand ends up going up too fast and ends up causing you to get squished by the gates. Once we're in here, you can hit the monitors if you want, but we have to wait a few moments for the sand just to go up just enough that we're able to get to that platform that's kind of swinging back and forth. Here I almost ended up going too fast and get squashed, but thankfully I caught it before I went too far. Then continue on, we're going to just drop on down and hug the right button so that we're able to land in this area. Now, when you make it to this segment here, you have kind of that blocked off thing there. We're going to instead go left, and this way we're just going to go back and forth, swinging a lot, grabbing a bunch of rings along the way, and work our way down. After hitting this checkpoint marker, this will propel us forward a good amount, and you can see the ghosts are starting to build up, so we have to be a bit quick about this area, sliding down a huge amount of sand, throwing ourselves way up into the air. Then when you make it here, you'll have this spring. Use the spring to jump up in order to pull the lever. Once you've done that, then you can use the spring to help you get up, and what you have to do is jump up. You can kind of go through the floor and get to this bumper or bouncer thing, and that way you can actually get up. Now here we end up hitting this. I don't even know if you have to. Like, the sand isn't really necessary during this segment. Either way, we're almost to the end of the level. You have one more checkpoint mark if you want to hit it. Then you have to push this and quickly jump down in order to make it to the Robotnik boss. He's inside of this giant golem thing that you'll have to attack the top portion of it, which will reveal Dr. Robotnik. He moves similar as far as hand movements are concerned to the final boss of Sonic 2. But you can actually jump on his arms in order to jump up and attack him. But pretty easy fight, and hitting him as far as exposing where Robotnik is negates his big laser move, so very, very easy fight. Now we're onwards to Lava Reef Zone, another favorite of mine for sure, and mostly because the music is just so awesome in Lava Reef, no doubt. And this is the perfect example of a level in Sonic & Knuckles that if you can get the fire shield, you want to hold on to it for as long as you possibly can, because almost nothing can hurt you. There are some enemies that can still do damage, but for the most part, a lot of things will not be able to hurt you during the course of the stage if you're able to get one of those fire shields, and there are a few of them scattered throughout the course of the level. Here we go, right next to the checkpoint marker, we get our fire shield, and now we can use this. Hit this robot in order to open up the path for us, and then we have to do a spin dash on this bicycle-like thing that will actually allow us to travel down. Don't have to really worry about lava or anything like that hurting us, as we can easily kind of go through. This robot's here kind of drilling into the ground, which will cause the ground to break, and he'll end up dying in the lava. And even though he drops us down into the lava, we're perfectly safe because of that fire shield. Have another one of those bike things that we're going to spin dash and now go up instead of down like we did last time in order to get up here. Spin dash, or in this case, we're going to use the fireball to bust through a whole bunch of rocks and then ride up a couple of these rocket-style spiky platforms. And that way we can get up to the higher area here. Bust on through this wall. Have another checkpoint marker and then continue on to the next little area here. Another fire shield that you're able to grab. They like to put them right near checkpoint markers so they're easy to re-get if you do end up losing one, losing a life throughout the course of the level. Over here, watch out for the giant spiky ball of doom that's going to chase you down. You want to go relatively slow, though, while going down. This way you'll be able to fall into the opening and not end up overshooting it. Now, when we make it over here, you have the lava that rises up and ends up going back down. But since we have the fire shield, we don't have to wait for the lava to go back down. We can just walk across the lava, then get on another one of these bikes and take this upwards to the next set of platforms. Heading over to the right, we can grab a couple of 10-ring monitors before getting on a rocket-propelled spiky platform that we can use to get up to that little ledge on the upper right here. Hit the button, or in this case we end up having Tails hit the button, but then we're able to continue on through this area. After traveling for just a bit more, hitting this switch will get another checkpoint marker and now make it to the end of Act 1 and the mini-boss. You have these two machines that come up the left and right sides and will fire out projectiles out at you. If you have a shield, you can actually deflect the bullets that come out. Each one of the hands can be destroyed, taking a little bit of damage each before they end up blowing up. Then you have the giant hand that comes out and tries to crush us. Wait for a little bit of time and then it will kind of like slam onto the ground to crush us, and if you're able to avoid getting crushed, you can then deliver a couple of hits to it in order to destroy it. Lava Reef Zone Act 2 is very different, has a different song, really cool song for sure, as we get into the next area. This is one of the levels that also appears in Sonic Mania, and the song that goes along with the remix of this song is just absolutely amazing. When we make it to this, watch out for a couple of Robotnik monitors, and then take the platforms that are kind of just slowly moving back and forth, and you can get to the next little area. Traveling on through, we'll do a spin dash here and there in order to bust through a couple of walls. You can go on to the top portion, or we're going to take the bottom path here. Since we have the flame shield, we don't have to worry about the flames shooting up. You may have to wait a few moments if you don't have the flame shield in order for them to go away, and then you can take this rotating set of platforms with spikes on them up to that next segment. After hitting a checkpoint marker, you can bounce off of this spring to more slow-moving platforms. Be careful not to jump on here and end up hitting that rotating spiky ball that are going around a couple of the platforms as we make our way up. Plenty more flames that are trying to shoot at us, and in the left corner is another one of the flame shields, so be sure to grab that if you've lost yours during the early part of Act 2 here. Always love these things. You grab a hold of them, and if you time it right, you'll be able to fling your way up really high up into the air to the upper level platforms. Over to the right, you can actually go in the wall. There's another one of those giant rings, and if you didn't have all the emeralds yet, you have another chance to get them there. There are plenty of opportunities throughout Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles to make sure that you're able to get all of the Chaos Emeralds. Even if you end up failing each one a couple of times, you should still have plenty of time in order to get all of them, as long as you know the locations of the giant rings, that is. Now, over here to the right, we're going to start climbing up a couple of platforms, more of the mace ball things swinging around some of them, and more flames right above that. You can hit this spring and run across the ceiling and time it so that you're able to land on this platform here, which can sometimes be a little bit difficult, more difficult than it probably needs to be. You then have this big giant staircase that you're going to make it to, and Knuckles is at the top, causing more mischief as always, and he's going to push down this giant thing towards you that will start rolling you up in it, this giant ice ball. This will cause the ground to break as it goes down, and once it does break, you'll fall down into the next area below. I always love this scene because, of course, you have the Robotnik giant death egg in the background. Since we have the flame shield, this area is a breeze. If you don't have it, it's obviously a lot tougher to deal with. It moves pretty quickly, and you have to watch out for all these missiles that are going to come crashing down. Thankfully, you have a little bit of warning for where these missiles are going to end up going. Then you'll have to climb back up a couple of the sets of stairs like we just did a few moments ago, except a little bit more difficult to do so, and it's easy to fall down into some of the gaps and end up getting killed by the pits. Now over here, you'll jump on these moving platforms that start to go down the lava. To the right, there's actually a platform with an electric shield, but since we have the fire one, we're just going to keep a hold of that. Once you start going down the waterfall, you can actually then head back to the left, which is what we actually need to do, technically, in order to get the boss to go. But since we have the fire shield, we can kind of goof off a little bit. Once this platform comes to a resting spot, Dr. Robotnik will show up for his boss fight here, and you can't actually hurt Robotnik. Instead, what you have to really do here is wait for these mace ball things to go back down towards him and end up running into him. He fires them out, and they end up hurting him as you go through this fight. So it's another battle in Sonic and Knuckles where you don't really have a whole lot of control as far as damaging it. It takes several turns of jumping back and forth between the different platforms that are being pulled towards Robotnik, but it won't take too long. It's still a pretty easy fight, even if you don't have the flame shield. It's relatively easy to jump safely from platform to platform, but once Dr. Robotnik's defeated, we're moving on to the next zone. Now next up is Hidden Palace Zone. Now this was a zone that was supposed to be in Sonic 2, but was cut late in development. The song for it ends up remaining in the Sonic 2 files, though interestingly enough is different than the song we end up getting here, and is a much different design. The plans for what Hidden Palace would have been in Sonic 2 is much different than the Hidden Palace Zone that we ended up getting here. In this version, it ends up working as basically the hub for where the giant Chaos Emerald is located, the Master Emerald, and thus the Super Chaos Emeralds that we've been gathering throughout the course of the game. When you make it to this spot, you actually get to fight Knuckles. Very easy fight. He does a spin dash. When he stops, you'll be able to jump attack him. He'll also do his glide move, and when he lands safely on the ground, you can then jump into him in order to deliver a hit. After the battle with Knuckles, you end up running into a bit of a cutscene as Robotnik steals the Master Emerald and then leads us into the next zone. Now we're here in Sky Sanctuary, easily one of my absolute favorites for sure. The music is awesome, and just an overall really cool design stage, one of the highlights of Sonic and Knuckles. After watching Robotnik's fortress rise up from the clouds, Knuckles regains his power in order to hit the bridge, so at least we're able to get into the stage itself. There's a lot of breaking platforms with the bridges, and you can fall down into plenty of pits or just pretty much fall off of Sky Sanctuary itself for Sonic to die. You have the Robotnik robots, egg robots, that are being sent towards you to fire lasers and potentially end up trying to take you out. And you also have these weird columns that are just kind of floating, and you can use them to platform your way. Then, like right here, you have these cool clouds. I've always liked the jump that Sonic has off of the clouds. And this level is basically kind of a nostalgic themed level in a way, because Mecha Sonic shows up, and you actually fight him in the style of Sonic 1's first boss, and then you fight him again as Sonic 2's boss from the Metropolis zone, before we finally face off with Mecha Sonic for a third time. I always like the overlapping parts of the level, since it's kind of like multiple layers. You can get squashed though in some of these spots though, so once again, it's one of those things where you have to be a little bit careful not getting squished. Here we're able to get a fire shield. Anytime I'm able to get a shield, I'm pretty much happy, so at least I have that extra hit, as well as I can do really cool things like the flying dash move in the air with the fireball. Over here to the right is where we'll battle the Mecha Sonic. Basically, it's just the clone version of the one from Metropolis Zone, but I'm going to keep jumping and attacking him in order to get rid of all the other clone Mecha Sonics basically first. Take them all out, and then you have to deliver the last hit to him in order to defeat him. Always thought the kind of transport warps were also pretty cool, where you're able to ride them up into the next part of the stage. Sometimes you have to wait for the platform to rise just enough so you'll be able to jump up to whatever platform you're trying to reach here. Just keep watching out for some of the Robotnik robots that are trying to attack you. When you take this transport up to the next segment, just a little bit over to the right, you'll have a tower. Just wait outside of it for a few moments, because some of the animal friends kind of come out, and then one of the Robotnik robots immediately afterwards. So if you go too quickly, you'll end up running into them. You then have this cool segment with all these springs that send you up a bunch of ramps, and then another teleporter, which ends up leading to the end of the stage here. Now we actually get to face off with Mecha Sonic, and it's very similar to the fight in Sonic 2, where he has his moves that he's able to kind of dash across, but in this case he's also able to kind of dash in the air, as well as bounce around. Still relatively easy to kind of deliver those hits. Tails can sometimes get in the way though during this fight and deliver damage to him and then end up causing us to get hit, but thankfully we're able to defeat Mecha Sonic, and now we're moving on to Death Egg Zone, the final full zone of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. It's kind of amazing, been a long journey, but we're finally in the final zone of the game. Death Egg, of course, is going to throw some tricky traps towards you and some tougher enemies that we're going to have to deal with as we make our way through it. Some new trappings here, including the electric field thing. You can just see buzzing up electricity constantly. I'm going to grab this bubble shield, but unfortunately I end up getting hit by a missile right after I end up grabbing it, so it doesn't last all that long. Boosting our way through, we have a whole bunch of these platforms that will rise up once you jump on them for just a couple of seconds, and it'll allow you to climb up to wherever you're trying to get to. Now, when you see the blue dotted platform layer there, it will disappear after a few seconds and then start going again. So you have to be quick in order to make your way across whenever you end up seeing one of those. In the anti-gravity thing, you'll have to manipulate Sonic a little bit in order to try to make him get through the entire thing. And then you'll have a conveyor belt thing that you'll have to ride on down, which will, of course, try to pull you in the different directions, potentially into spikes and such. Having the electric shield during the stage here, with so much electricity buzzing through the area, we're able to kind of get through things a bit easier because of it, for at least as long as we're able to hold on to the electric shield. When you make it into this room here, you actually have to hit this contraption in the middle. It has 6 buttons, 3 on one side, 3 on the other. You have to turn them all red by running into each. Thankfully, they don't turn off if you hit the same one twice, but if you're able to hit all 6 of the buttons, it'll open up the thing to the right, which will allow us to continue on in the stage. Now we have these weird things. There's a countdown, and then basically you just go along a big, weird thing of rings. It just automatically transports Sonic. Some of these paths that these things take, just absolutely convoluted, but still kind of a cool thing nonetheless to watch Sonic just kind of go completely crazy in these things. As we hit the checkpoint and make it to the end of the area here, we now have the Act 1 boss. Basically, he has all these balls rotating around him, and when you end up attacking the eye in the machine, it'll cause them to burst, sending spikes everywhere. We're going to jump on him a whole bunch in order to defeat the first form. After that's defeated, though, the battle's not over. He then starts moving around, firing a big laser below him, and has spiky platforms that are rotating around him very fast, which, of course, will end up hurting you if you run into the spikes, also making it hard in order to deliver hits to him. As Act 2 begins, you have a little bit of a different background. You have the planet in there, which is kind of cool. You also have a lot of gravity gimmick going on throughout the course of Death Egg 2. I also love this. You have to hit a direction that you want Sonic to go, but just watching Sonic kind of flip and rotate in that thing, I always thought was pretty humorous. Be sure to hit this fire shield. Now we get to do the conveyor belt thing that we did in Act 1, but this time we're doing one upside down, so a little bit of added difficulty to that. Throughout the level, you'll find these in order to kind of switch if you're on the ceiling or the ground, as well as there's also a few buttons with arrows on them, which represent the ability to flip the gravity and go from one to another. The only thing really super difficult about the level, I guess, is getting used to the gravity, and the fact there are a lot of spikes and electricity. They're going to end up trying to cause Sonic to lose lives here near the end of the game. Here we can do a spin dash and grab a hold of this platform and ride that up. It will automatically start going, but since we have the electric shield, we just use that in order to help us. Getting inside one of these things, now we get to go all kinds of crazy fast directions as we ride inside this thing before being blasted off into another one of those conveyor belt-like segments. Be careful, of course, we're going to do our best not to get hit by missiles, as well as running into the spikes. Now here you have to use kind of the gravity and get a little bit of speed, and then you can jump, and then use the springs as they pop out of the wall in order to make your way down. After hitting a checkpoint marker, and we're continuing on, we get another one of these tower things that sends us flying through and now upside down. Now we get to actually do one of these things, but upside down. It doesn't really affect much
but still, the fact we're doing one of these upside down. After a whole bunch of those weird ring things and sending Sonic all kinds of different directions and flying all around, we eventually get to another tower thing, and immediately after going in one tower, going upside down, we then go to another one and end up on the ground level again. We're getting near the end of the stage here. We have another one of the conveyor belt segments. Now I'm just going to kind of cheese it, since I have the electric shield, in order to kind of get through that area quickly, hitting the checkpoint marker, and now making it to the boss located here. Now, for this boss, you have this robot who ends up spawning these little spiky machines that end up kind of going around on the ground level, if they're on the ground level. But if you go inside one of the towers, you'll flip the gravity of Sonic, of course, going from the ground to the ceiling and ceiling to the ground, and this causes the little robots to follow you as well, and you have to manipulate them in order to go up and crash into the robot. When they do end up blowing up, though, they do send 3 spikes, as you can see, armed on top of them, in different directions. So you just gotta make sure that you're able to dodge them, which sometimes can be a little bit difficult to see because of the background, as well as the towers kind of being similar color to the little spikes. A pretty easy fight, though. You can kind of just hang out on the far right side if you want to, and just kind of keep going right back inside the tower, get them to go up, and then go right back through, and keep repeating the process until the robot's taken care of. After the robot is defeated, we're heading on over to the right and getting to face off with Dr. Robotnik. He jumps inside of a giant machine, no surprise. And this fight is broken up into 2 different segments. The first segment has us dealing with the hands of the robot, and then dealing with the actual robot itself, with a giant laser cannon being what he's armed with. So for this segment, you basically want the arms to kind of come down, the hands come down, and you're going to jump and attack them, or you can cheese it a little bit by doing a spin dash, and you can actually do this to bounce between the fingers, doing a lot of damage to them, hitting them multiple times with each time you do one of these spin dashes. Once all the fingers have been taken care of, the robot goes away, but then we'll be coming back up the opposite side, the left side here, and then starts chasing us. We're then going to hit the robot in order to expose the Master Emerald, which is firing lasers at us, and keep hitting it in order to defeat him. Be careful of the giant laser, but once he's been defeated, the fight's not over yet though. Dr. Robotnik's going to escape and try to steal the Master Emerald. We have to now chase down Dr. Robotnik as the platform we're on is falling apart. So you have to kind of keep moving correctly and not overdoing it with your attacks so that you bounce off too far and end up falling down into the massive pit that's now forming behind us. Once you deliver enough hits though, Robotnik drops the Master Emerald. Now this is where the game would end if you didn't have all of the Chaos Emeralds or Super Emeralds. If you have them all though, you make it to the final zone of the game, and here you get to play as Hypersonic and have to chase down Dr. Robotnik one more time inside of his giant robot. This marked the first time that we had a segment like this in Sonic, and it's something that's been used a lot, where you have Sonic in his super form, or hyper form in this case, chasing down some sort of creature or Dr. Robotnik or whatever for the actual final boss. During this segment, you have to do your best to watch out for a lot of the rocks and the missiles. Now, you can't die because you're Hypersonic, you can't be hurt, but you of course can run out of rings, and you need the rings to power your form. So you gotta make sure that you keep grabbing the rings in order to keep Sonic going. Now, You can just kind of fly normally if you want, but if you're able to hit the buttons as well as hold forward, you'll go faster. When you catch up to the machine, he'll start firing missiles at you and little machine gun fire. The machine gun fire is just a nuisance to knock you backwards, but in order to damage him, you have to take the missiles, get them to chase you, and then have them run in to the beginning front of the robot itself. It takes a little bit to get used to, but once you do have the hang of it, it's a pretty simple fight, and hopefully you'll have enough rings in order to do this. But the fight's not over yet, though, even after that. He ends up escaping one more time in the giant robot blasting through space, and we have to chase him down in order to run into him. Gather a few rings if you need to, but you can just kind of hit the button and forward in order to get a lot of speed in order to catch up with him in this form pretty quickly. Just run into him several times, and once you've run into him enough, though, the battle's over finally, and you get to sit back and enjoy the ending to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So, there you have it, Sonic 3 and Knuckles 100% getting all of the Chaos Emeralds and then the Super Chaos Emerald, saving the Master Emerald. Knuckles seems pretty happy in the long run, and Sonic and Tails are riding off in the plane. One of the absolute masterpieces of the Sega Genesis games, the classic Sonic series, and just platformers in general. For many, this is the best that it's ever been, and it's never been better than this as far as the 2D Sonics are concerned. For me personally, Sonic 2 is always going to be my personal favorite, but I totally understand why people would love Sonic 3, or Sonic 3 and Knuckles in particular. You're getting so many zones, and just so many levels and great action throughout the course of it with awesome music. It's just a great retro game for sure. Now, overall, if you play the game as just Tails, or if you play it as Knuckles, there are some different paths, and the game is obviously a tad bit different. Especially if you're playing as Knuckles, different paths and different areas that you'll end up having to do because of it. While I don't have any plans currently to play through the Knuckles version of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, if you are interested in seeing it, be sure to let me know down in the comments. If there's a good amount of people wanting to see it, I'm more than willing to put the time and effort into learning the Knuckles version of the game and being able to get a playthrough for that out as well in the future. I do plan on also covering the other Sonic games, the Game Gear ones, as well as the Master System Sonic the Hedgehog games, hopefully in the relatively near future as well.
As the credits finish up, Sonic jumps towards the screen in his hyper form with the flashing colors and all that cool stuff. And then after this, we get one last screen with the Sonic 3 and Knuckles logo and the characters all standing in front of it or on the letters and such. After this, the game goes back to the main title screen where we're able to continue the adventure or start it all over again. But anyway, guys, that's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.